Hello, listeners. It feels like it's been forever since we've had an episode of the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast, but we are alive and we are well amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are here for another show. I don't have Cody, I don't have Antonio, I don't have any of our Pittsburgh Sports Castle guests and co-hosts, but I'm Rachael Kriger, and I am with my friend, longtime colleague, kind of my mentor of sorts, John Krysinsky from Pittsburgh Soccer Now. He runs the whole shabam there, and we are here to talk about soccer. It is the sport that I love. It's the sport that John loves. It's the sport that everyone else on the Pittsburgh Sports Castle team says we're just going to wing it because we don't know what's going on. So John just released a book. Go ahead, John.
No, it's great to be here. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. John just released a book, which is awesome. I had no idea he was even writing it. I've known John now for, 4 years now, and I had no idea that he was working on this book. It is called The Miracle on the Mon. It is about that fateful day at a Riverhounds match where the Hounds won 5-4. It was a huge comeback victory on the Mon at Highmark Stadium. And John, just go ahead and talk about the book and what kind of gave you the jump to want to write this.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. This is it's something that I wanted to do. 2015 was kind of a magical year for the Riverhounds. It was in terms of the win-loss column, not so much, but just in terms of sheer excitement. I think that was something that, I had been covering the team as a reporter and kind of following the team really since the Highmark Stadium, since Highmark Stadium opened and the Highmark Stadium era. And even in that short period of time that from 2013 to the point where that match took place on May 30th, 2015, so much has happened with that organization. So many ups and downs. The ups of the moving into the new stadium, to the absolute bottom falling out in 2014 with bankruptcy and ownership in turmoil situation, and that whole season having to go through that, ending in bankruptcy court after the season ended, not knowing if there would even be a team the following year. But then by the time they get to that following year, 2015, the team that was assembled by, really at the last minute by Mark Steffens and Richard Nightingale, and that they came together, and it just was a very unique group that year. And they were never out of a game. It seemed like they weren't great, especially early in that year defensively, but they could score at will, it seemed like, at that level. And it was just every game was a roller coaster ride. That whole season was a roller coaster ride. So I wanted to, obviously, that game over the years since that match, that just so much it had gained continued, I don't know what you say, just continued reverence, especially from the Steel Army, and the diehard Riverhounds fans had always looked back to that game with great, just so many great memories. And it's just kind of a turning point maybe for the franchise, not so much in terms of just turning things around completely, but just a point that, less than a year after bankruptcy, that they could have a moment like that. And it was such an incredible moment that I had written a long form piece about it within a few days after the match, and it was pretty well received by a lot of the diehard Pittsburgh soccer fans. So in the years since, I've kept that, and I say there's got to be I want to take that to another level. The only way really to take it to another level was to write a book about it. And once some of the key players started to fade away from the organization that were part of that day, particularly Rob Vincent, Danny Earls, and Kevin Kerr, it just made more and more sense that once I sat down with those three individuals, particularly, that it was worth being told this story about this franchise, and those three being centerpieces of the story. It was it was a story worth being told. It was a book worth being written. And so it just happened, that way, kind of organically over the years. But this winter, I sat down and really wanted to make it happen. And, again, thanks to everybody that contributed, we finally made it happen.
You guys can all question me on my soccer expertise. I just fact checked myself. It was a 6-5 win. I totally just muffed that up. Me and numbers do not work together. The Pittsburgh Sports Castle team knows that extremely well. And John, I kind of came into the scene covering the team in 2016, so I totally missed out on being with the media and covering this match in May of 2015. But I remember hearing about it and it just being this big talked about event. Like, they were on the news and they were being talked about in the newspapers, and it was like soccer is becoming something here in Pittsburgh. Of course, that same year we had Megan Klingenberg win a World Cup,
right,
being from Pittsburgh, and it was just kind of putting soccer on the map. And I appreciate that it's not just a story about one game. It's a story about these players, about the club, and about just everything that was happening in soccer in Pittsburgh. And I know that is something, soccer in Pittsburgh is something that you're passionate about. I'm passionate about. Our friends at Pittsburgh Soccer Now are passionate about. I want to talk about the interviews, because I've gotten to talk to some of these guys a lot. I've talked to Kevin multiple times over the years. He's such a nice guy. Danny, I've gotten to talk to a handful of times. You interviewed our friend Matt Jica, who was doing the play-by-play and the commentating for the match. You mentioned Rob Vincent. I got to talk to him when he came back on loan for those couple games when he was with DC United. So what was it like sitting down, talking with these players, whether it be in person or over the phone, and just doing all of these interviews? It must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. And honestly, this project would not be possible without their input and really their involvement. What was it like? It was fun because we got a chance to sit back and talk about this. I got quotes from them right after the match, obviously. Particularly after the match, it was Mark Steffens, the coach at the time, Rob Vincent. I was trying to find Kevin, and it was just a lot of chaos that night. So having to deal with the deadline and some different things, I just wanted to get the story done. So I didn't really have a chance that night and it's not like I had other, we didn't even have Pittsburgh's Soccer Now at the time. I was writing for my own site, Soccer Report, and it was just, I was winging it. So that story, it didn't get as much media attention as enough coverage that night, even, I think, to get the real story. So it was wonderful. Now, over the years, I've had numerous conversations about the match with all of the participants, particularly Rob and Kevin. What's interesting is even the first couple of years he was here, 14, 15, 16, I don't remember interviewing Danny Earls all that much. And that was something that came up when Matt Ika and I spoke recently. And we was like, you know what, we didn't really talk to Danny all that much. So I was like, I have to include him in this. He scored two of the most instrumental goals in the match, leading up to the, to keep the Riverhounds alive, really, in the last 10 minutes of regulation. And not only that, he was the team captain, so he was an essential piece of that story. So yeah, it was really fun to sit down, and with each, it was about a good hour and a half time that they just gave me their time. I'd sat down with Kevin in the off season. Both Kevin and Robbie knew about this. Probably the only people I told maybe 2 years ago. Say, hey, I'm really looking at working on this project, but I didn't really tell anybody else. I said, what do you think? And they gave me a little bit of feedback. So it was nice to kind of get their feedback that this would be something special that would work, getting their feedback, getting their involvement. But it was still an independent project, obviously. It wasn't something that was Riverhound sponsored. So to have their cooperation, since both are still with the club, and the fact that the club, PR department's been very helpful through the process. and providing me things that I need or information or stats or any kind of things I was doing as far as research goes. So that was very helpful. So to be able to sit down with those, that's where I started. It started with a sit down with Rob, started with a sit down with Kevin. And then from there, it just kind of grew. And then I thought, we mentioned all maybe the Pittsburgh related terms. I made sure, I wanted to make sure I told that part of the history of soccer in Pittsburgh. That needed some background, some perspective. So who better to talk to about that than Gene Klein? So Gene Klein really helps build the narrative during the Riverhounds early years. I had interviewed Justin Evans so many times, and I had so much from Justin. I didn't need a full sit down with Justin, but he was a text or a phone call away if I needed anything. And that was really where I kind of gathered a lot of steam with the beginning and the history. I also wanted to make sure, and this is where it got real fun, was I wanted to make sure that I told the story of the Harrisburg City Islanders and the Keystone Derby Cup. So when you get into those chapters, I try to go back and look at like the Keystone Derby Cup, for example. I just felt like there was an important piece of the story was to tell, not only where the Riverhounds came from, but in 2003, how the City Islanders came to be, and that they, in central Pennsylvania's kind of story of soccer, just enough so that it would give the reader a sense of what was going on and what the Riverhounds were up against. Because honestly, the City Islander franchise had their number for really up until 2015. It was the City Islanders and Bill Becker. And, one of the first people that were involved in Central Pennsylvania professional soccer was Bob Lilly. Obviously, that's where he's from. He's from Carlisle. So he lent his perspectives throughout the book as well. So it was really fun to get all of that information and to talk with everybody, and just that each of those individuals as well shared the same excitement that I had and that you're expressing and that we all wanted. And I think that the Steel Army, and that's another piece of the puzzle, was can't do a book about the Riverhounds without the fan base and that experience, not just that night, that magical night, but all of everything, their story and how they came to be. And that's all in the book. And that piece is very important. So again, I had a lot of quotes over the years and some stories that I had worked on. So I had something to work with the Steel Army, but then I got some perspective, and a couple members, Steve Lyons and Mike Shoemaker, contributed heavily to the narrative, and in particular that 2015 season and those moments, particularly the Miracle of the Mon match, what that meant to the Steel Army and to the franchise. So to sum up your question, it's a long answer. I apologize, but it was just there was a lot of fun getting everybody's input and involvement. And I didn't mention also City Islanders having Neil Schaefer, a Pittsburgh, actually Aliquippa native, who played at Robert Morris, then played 2 years for the Riverhounds, but then became the Harrisburg City Islander captain. I mean, what a great perspective to have that he was the captain of the other team in the Miracle on the Mon game. So it's just, and the fact is, at the end of the book, you get to see kind of where Neil is nowadays, and where Nick Noble, the goalkeeper of the Harrisburg City Islanders, who had the Steel Army in his ear all those years, and they give their perspective. So, and the thing is, everyone really enjoyed those times, have a lot of positive memories from those years, win or lose, or no matter what happened. I think everybody looked back at those years, very fond times. And honestly, with Harrisburg being gone, it's a special story to tell, because we will probably never ever see this rivalry again. We'll never see something like this ever happen again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned it right there. Harrisburg no longer existing. The Riverhounds kind of pseudo rival now is the Bethlehem Steel, and just to have that kind of history lesson on the Islanders is something.
They're not even Bethlehem Steel anymore. They're Philadelphia Union too.
That's right. They rebranded.
Right.
The former Bethlehem Steel FC, the current now the number 2 team to an MLS club, which is happening so much more often. Pittsburgh, I remember they used to have that affiliation with the Columbus Crew, and we got some great players through there too, but that was not during the Miracle on the Mon years. One person that you mentioned that you collaborated with, not just in an interview aspect on this book, but in an artistry aspect, is Danny Earls, and the captain that you said had this profound impact on this match, on this team, on the 2015 season as a whole. He did the art for your book. How did that, and I think most people in Pittsburgh know that Danny is an artist. That's all his Instagram is flooded with. He talked about it when he did talk to media. He talked about it a lot during his time with the Riverhounds. So how did that kind of relationship strike, and how did you pitch to Danny, hey, do you want to do the art for the book?
Yeah, as I said, I hadn't interviewed him a whole lot during his time. I mean, I had obviously posted some post-game stuff, maybe a pre-game once or twice, but not. I never really got one-on-one with him, which was an absolute joy. And the fact that he's in Ireland, so that made it a little challenging. I wanted to make sure I got the interview done for the book first. It was like, as I said, I talked to Robbie and Kevin first, Robbie Vincent and Kevin Kerr, to give me the heart, the meat of the story, the quotes that I needed, I think, really to tell the story. And then as I spoke with those two, it became absolutely clear that this story wouldn't be the same without Danny Earls. So I needed that a lot more from him. And that's kind of what I did. And then in that part of that conversation, it wasn't even until after I was done with that first interview with him that I said, "And Danny, I really just love everything about what you do in terms of your art, and I think it would be fabulous if you could contribute that to this book." And he was like, "Absolutely." He wanted it. He was all about it, and we worked it out. And the rest is history. I mean, it's stunning. I mean, my first thought when I first saw it was this is absolutely stunning. And he had sent me some mock-ups prior to that. And the mock-ups were like, I'm sure they'll be great, but they were just mock-ups. They were just like, a little scratch-up drawing, just this is what it would look like. And I still, even at that point, I had no idea what to expect. But then when I saw that first image in its full color of the way he gave me a couple options in the mock-ups, but then I said, this is kind of what I want. And then he put it together, and I didn't even, at that point, I was just like, this is perfect. You don't even have to do anything to this. So he's a true professional. He's doing it, I know he's working with MLS. He does all types of artwork for different, but his style is so unique, and it was fantastic. I'm still amazed that the first, when I first saw the image that we ended up using, that was the, I didn't even, I mean, it was just, I was like, that's perfect.
It kept you speechless, I can tell. Yeah, it's definitely amazing. I saw the artwork and I was just blown away. I mean, Danny has unspeakable talent on the field, but his artistry is just absolutely fantastic. Now, to clarify something too, when you said you talked to Mark Steffen, did you talk to him? You obviously talked to him after the match, but did you have a follow-up this past winter, kind of sit down, talk with him? No?
I did not have any luck, really. Josh Reif and I spoke a little bit on and off, and then I was trying to get Mark, and then I know it just didn't work out. Right? I didn't get a chance to talk to Mark as a follow-up, but I had so much from Mark over the years. And not only that, Mark and I had stayed in touch after he had left, and he had contacted me and communicated with me after I had written kind of a final column after he was let go, and that whole difficult situation. So I kind of knew where he stood with a lot. And, I think that the story where his input is into the story, I think fits the narrative very, very well. And I think his impact cannot be understated in terms of for that particular season. And I think Richard Nightingale, who only had that one season as well, but did make a really good observation that I think he was the right guy at the right time for that particular year. I think he was, and even Bob Lilly who's obviously had even better success with the club. Said at that time he felt that Mark Steffens was a great choice for this club, and I think he was. So I think everyone agrees. But yeah, it was a shame I didn't get a chance to talk to him. One other quick point on Danny and his artwork. I just wanted to add that, I lost my train of thought, but it was those mock-ups had a couple different ideas. One was we wanted to include the fans somehow. We wanted to include the Steel Army. So we had that flag, that image of a flag. We wanted to include the city. There was so many things we wanted to include, and I think that's what made that drawing so difficult initially to kind of come up with. And he, like I said, he gave me multiple options, and I think he somehow. Once we kind of put our heads together, he captured what we wanted. But I just wanted to make that an added point.
You lost your train of thought because the art is just amazing and leaves you speechless. I totally understand, and I'm sure Danny, if he listens to this, will be blushing. The Steel Army, you just brought it up. I mean, they are the rowdiest bunch of Pittsburghers that we know. Lucky to be part of the group. I believe you are as well. And they are just, listen, I sit down on the field and I take pictures for Sports Castle and Pittsburgh Soccer Now, and I sit there with my computer and they're just chanting, and those poor goalkeepers that have to be in front of the Steel Army, they are just so loud and rambunctious, but in the best way possible. What was it like getting their input and talking to these people about how much, not just this game, but this sport has affected them, whether it be in the book or whether it just be in casual conversation? Because I know I've talked to people and they love soccer so much and they want the sport to grow in Pittsburgh. They're not just at Riverhounds games, they're at Hotspurs games, and they're at Steel City FC games, which is now part of the Hotspurs. They want the sport to flourish on all levels. So what was that like, just kind of talking to them about how important it is here in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I said the book wouldn't be possible without the input of the players who made those magical moments and those incredible goals and that just amazing comeback. But the thing that kept them going in the most difficult times were the Steel Army, to make the trip in 2014 when the team, I think, finally won one match, and they still make, so there's some of that backstory there going on in the book. But look, I mean, they were there at the beginning in the Chartiers Valley high school days when there might have been 15 Steel Army members, but they were there every game, and and that's where it started. It was important to tell that part of the story. So when we got to 2015, and even then, it wasn't what it is today. And I think that arc, their story, where they've come from since the beginning is an important part of the evolution of this franchise. That soccer culture, and I've said this numerous times now in the past few weeks talking about the book with a lot of people, is soccer culture has finally taken on, actually exists in Pittsburgh. I think, and that's the key. Like it may still be a small following, a small group, but my hat's off to them. Is just they've created a greater, a deeper, a little bit larger soccer culture in Pittsburgh, which didn't exist before, really at all, before 2019. I'm getting my dates all screwed up. Somewhere around 2008 and 2009 when they first came about. Before that, even if you went to Riverhound games, it was mostly families. There wasn't an organized soccer culture, and they have taken it. They started small. They built. Highmark Stadium came, and they've just all the way through. So to be able to do those interviews and interview everybody involved with the book, even the players, and it kept coming back to this is why we play. We do this. The players. This is why. The fans. It's all about the fans. It's all about this group, this Steel Army group, and so that was important, and to tell their story and to get. I think a lot of that is captured very well in the book, from both the players and from the fans' perspective of what a match like the Miracle on the Mon meant to them, and all of that is captured in the book, and it was so much fun to be able to hear that from all sides, and how important soccer culture really is to building a successful even at the second division in the United States, how important it is, and I think a lot of that is told in the story.
This might be an impossible question, John, but what was your favorite part about writing the book?
Well, the favorite part, I think, is when you get into the game, to the actual Miracle of the Mon game, and it's multiple chapters, obviously. And when you get into that and you start to get that riveting, you start to feel like you're reliving the match in writing, in reading the story. And I think that's my goal is as a writer is to hopefully draw in the reader to that point where their heart is pumping and they're getting excited, just reliving this if they've already experienced it or if they've never experienced it. Like, holy crap, this is really unbelievable how they did this and how they came back from such a deficit and how they did all of this. And I've heard people tell me that it made them want to go back and watch the match on YouTube. And, I was worried because in this, you write a book during this day and age and you've already got it. The game already exists on YouTube. The game already exists in so many other ways. People are sharing information about it. So I was concerned about, well, where you write a book about not just the game, but this whole backstory, but really sharing those moments again, if that would come through and be as riveting. And so far, other people have given me that feedback. So that's been the most exciting piece, is that when I was rereading it and rereading it over and over again as a book editor, as a book writer, as the author of the book, making sure it's being told the way I wanted it to be, it was very, very exciting just to relive that over and over again. That's all I could say. And I could tell you that there's points in the book where I share my emotion, and it was coming up again as I was writing it and rewriting it.
Yeah, and you're great with segues here, John. I got to tell you, because I'm going to tell you to take off your author cap, your editor cap, and your journalist cap. Going back to May 30th, 2015, being just a soccer fan, what was that moment like? What was it like seeing your team in the city just come back and win this game and everyone go crazy?
Well, I try to, it's hard because I really do try to separate myself in those moments, but it was hard because I say this in the book, I won't give away exactly in that moment of, like, say when Rob scored or when Kevin scored or when that was happening. But as someone who wanted to see the sport thrive in the city, and that was just, and I kind of, I guess you could say I felt more like a fan at that moment than I ever have in covering the team or working for the team, or those little brief periods there, or in any role I've had in terms of being a soccer journalist or a broadcaster or whatever. So I think it was a very unique feeling. It was like, this is such, it's like one of those things where it's such a remarkable match or a game or something that you just sit there and you say, is this really happening? Like, this is really special. Like, you just know it's happening. I just think about some of those, like, legendary games. I think it was the Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds World Series 1975, and they were in extra innings, and Carlton Fisk hadn't hit the home run yet, but Pete Rose came up to bat, and he was talking to the Red Sox catcher, and they're just in the middle of this, like, amazing game with so many swings back and forth, and they just look at each other and go, "This is really, amazing." Like, kind of like they just both acknowledge that moment. And I think the same thing when I was sitting there in the press box, but even the players on the field, I think when you talk to them and I did all those interviews, they were, especially that match. But really all the Pittsburgh Harrisburg matches that season were like that. And there was just something, it was just hard to describe, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of segueing to, talking about the current team, just you've been on the scene a lot longer than I have, covering Pittsburgh soccer, the Riverhounds and whatnot. Just how have you seen the sport evolve, and how have you seen the team evolve to what it is now? We look at, numbers and stuff. I hate numbers, but I got to look at them for attendance and stuff. And it is going up and up gradually. And there have been times where there's hardly any room to walk to get to the bathroom or to the field to do your interviews. You gotta weave through people, and it wasn't always that way. I mean, I remember joining the coverage team in 2016, and there were not that many people at the matches. You said it, there were a few families, there were families of the players and stuff like that. But now it's it's caught on, and people are seeing that the Riverhounds are a legitimate team and that they are exciting and fun to watch. So just in your words, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. What is your experience like with seeing the growth?
Well, I think you made a very important point, that it's been gradual and it's been incremental, which, again, they needed to find financial stability. I talk a lot about in the book. I addressed that topic, and how important it was for this franchise, the Pittsburgh's professional soccer franchise, to ultimately find that financial stability. And really, thanks mostly to Tuffy Schallenberg. I mean, because you just have to tip your cap to Tuffy, and he's really helped stabilize the financial health of the professional soccer in Pittsburgh. So I think that's really a key piece of the puzzle. I think there's still a lot of question marks out there in terms of how can they get to that even next level, with USL's changing and the second division standards. But once USL became second division in 2018 and the hiring of Bob Lilly, they have been able to continue that incremental growth. They haven't, done what's most important, is bringing a successful product on the field, and that will, bring fans out. So that has happened. Now some of those other things where after they found all these years of, financial up and downs, they kept the academy going. They built around the youth soccer programming as well. And, there's been some controversy with all of that, and that's also brought up in the book. But they've just kind of stayed their course. As they did that, you've seen all the clubs that they competed against, those old guard franchises like Rochester and Wilmington, Harrisburg, kind of all drop off, and it's very unfortunate. But the thing was, just again, a little bit more stable ownership after the smoke cleared from the bankruptcy hearings. And, I think in terms of the fan support and attendance, like I said, it's incremental. Winning will help. Winning will continue to help. And now they're building new facilities, and they bought the land where Highmark Stadium exists. So these are all positive signs. Obviously this year's could be considered a bit of a setback, obviously, for everyone in the United States soccer landscape and really around the world, but in terms of dealing with COVID. But we'll see. It'll be very, very interesting to see how the financial health, and how the Riverhounds will be able to navigate through the next few months as they hope and plan to start the season in July and restart the season and survive this, because this is going to be a massive challenge.
And people in the United States can have that opportunity. There's hardly any other sports on, and soccer is coming back. NWSL is kicking off their Challenge Cup on June 27th. MLS just announced their plans for a July through August tournament for the MLS is Back tournament, and the Riverhounds and the USL have not pinned down, but they have thought of June 11th as the date for the kickoff of July 11th. I'm getting my months mixed up because of COVID. I still think it's May.
I know. Crazy.
It's crazy. I don't remember any of April, to be totally honest with you. But July 11th is what they're planning for, and the Riverhounds did not play their first match. A couple teams did play one match. I know in MLS they played two, and then NWSL was just kicking off their preseason when COVID hit. But the Riverhounds did not play any matches yet, aside from their preseason. So July 11th is what they're planning for a kickoff. Have you heard anything about that, John? And what is kind of your outlook on the team this year? You know, it's going to be a reduced season no matter what.
Yeah, anticipating a reduced season, but at this point, they're not really saying much beyond that. I think, you know, the Athletic reported today a little bit more information that the USL is committed to its communities, which means they're committed to playing all their games in their home stadiums, as opposed to, you know, and I think logistically it would be very, very difficult for them to find a central location. Even if they did it by conference, it would have been very logistically, I think, very, very difficult. So the commitment to be able to give the communities their teams and they're an option, even if we're talking about not full crowds, but maybe some version of fans at some point. We all of that is still up in the air, and we could see maybe the first month or two have almost no fans, and then gradually see. We just don't know, and I think that's, you know, if somebody wanted me to give any advice about what's going to happen regarding COVID, I think that's the biggest thing you can say is that there even in March, April to May and to now, we've been dealing with so many unknowns. What I do have a feeling that as a country and as we're going to come back little by little, I think, to the things that we've all been doing, and I think that soccer is a part of that. And I think we'll start to see everything done with, you know, strict guidelines and people following different, you know, requirements, whether it's wearing masks, whether it's physical distancing, all of those type of things. And the Riverhounds are eager, as you can see from some of the information that they've shared. And all the youth soccer organizations and the college and the pros, that they want to move. They want to, I mean, Bob Lilly spoke with me over a month ago, I think probably about a month ago, somewhere in the past month, about, you know, we're moving forward. We're preparing for all these different scenarios. We're involving our sports medicine team every step of the way. They're very involved with us and making sure that we're following all the state guidelines. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be seeing, as far as the team this year, it feels like all of that has gotten lost in the shuffle. I think, again, when you have a veteran coach and you have a lot of veteran players that are returning to a system that they know, it can only help. I think it's difficult to get into the X's and O's in more detail, but I think having that, just that stability, that veteran leadership from Bob Lilly, and even having, you know, Canardo Forbes, Tony Walls is with this team now. I mean, that's a huge addition in terms of leadership, in terms of, hey, we've been through this rodeo, guiding the younger players, and then having, you know, the younger players that you believe in, and like a Robbie Mertz that you can build this team around. I have a lot of confidence that this year's edition of the Riverhounds will be right up there. There will be I think before the season started, some of us were predicting maybe not quite top 2 finish, but they would still be fairly successful. I'm gonna go out on a limb a little bit. I think that they're a top 3 Eastern Conference team. In light of these circumstances, I feel even better about that. And again, I'm rambling and I'm going on and on, but I want to make one more point. Is that, again, when I think about Bob Lilly, I think about moments like we've seen, like when sports get turned upside down, really the great coaches seem to surface. So the NBA strike in '99, Craig Popovich led the Spurs to the title that year. That wasn't by accident. I mean, Pop, we've seen, is a great coach. Even the strike years, the football strike years, Joe Gibbs and the Redskins and Bill Walsh, the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, these guys were considered geniuses. They were, they were always 3-4 steps ahead of the curve, everybody else in their league. And I think that's how I look at Bob with the Riverhounds. I think he's a step ahead of a lot of people. Now, can he uproot teams with the resources that Louisville have? Those type of teams? I don't know, but my take is that he's gonna have a championship caliber team out there, no matter what the circumstances will be for the next few months.
Bob Lilly, one of the most respected coaches in all of the USL and in American soccer in general. John, it was great having you on tonight. I'm glad that you were able to join. I'm glad we could do this. If you haven't gotten your copy of Miracle on the Mon already, please go out and get it. I'm only 2 chapters in. I told John while we were off the air, I'm like juggling 3 books. So Deacon Mike, if you are listening, I am so sorry I have not gotten your book back to you yet, but I will get it before your ordination. But juggling 3 books, 2 chapters in, but it is already a great book. You need to go get it. John, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on Amazon. You can all get it on Amazon. Yep. We will be posting the link to the book on the podcast page and on Pittsburgh Sports Castle. John, can you tell people where to find you on Twitter and just any final thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, John Krysinsky, at John Krysinsky. It's JohnKrysinsky, not to be confused with the actor who was trending earlier today on Twitter. So I want to make sure that's he's the imposter and I'm one you should be following. But no, he's by all intents and purposes seems like a great guy. It just so you can follow me on Twitter, John Krysinsky, and obviously Pittsburgh Soccer Now has its own Twitter handle. We also have our own Facebook page and Instagram as well. So you go get all the latest news in Pittsburgh soccer. We cover pretty much the full array from the Riverhounds professional all the way down to the high school and youth level. We have a lot of great contributors, including yourself. And
Thank you.
I always appreciate having more coverage in the Pittsburgh area. So, to have Sports Castle and to have others involved covering the team, I think it's only a bonus for the growth of soccer in Pittsburgh. And you're, Rachael, I mean, you've been so great for this game, especially the women's game, giving Steel FC and Steel City FC and now they're going to be the Hotspurs and just giving the women's game the due it deserves, and hopefully we'll get even more in the coming years. I just appreciate everything you do.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate you as well. I appreciate the mentorship that you give me and the opportunity to do all of these great things. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Rachael Kriger. I have 2 A's in my name, not just one. It is a curse that I must deal with. We have to shout out our Pittsburgh Sports Castle Twitter at PGH Sports Castle. And we were just approved for iHeartRadio. So if you are on iHeartRadio, you can find our podcast. We are also on all major platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to check us out by searching our name. We are also on Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and of course, Spreaker, our home where we record our shows. Listeners, if you ever have any ideas for podcast prompts and topics, feel free to reach out to members of our team in the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Twitter to send some ideas along. Thanks for joining us. Purchase Miracle on the Mon. You will not be disappointed, and we'll see you next time.